I received a text, a message text on my phone yesterday. I think it was a three-way going on. Sam was also involved, informing us that Kenny was in the hospital and wouldn't make it to the meeting tonight, but he recommended somebody that I forget, either he said is his sponsor or his sponsee, but he said he'll do a great job. So I told Matt, I said, I'd like to talk to you before you come on the meeting so I could answer any questions. I also wanted to qualify him. And I asked a few questions, and this guy knows his stuff. We're in for a really great talk. Please help me welcome Matt. You got to unmute. Hit that little microphone thing.
I unmuted it after you unmuted it, which meant I ended up muting it, right? Two wrongs made a right there. So I was going to say that we will get into Kenny a little bit here because my move with working with Kenny is specifically geared towards some of the things that we're talking about in this specific reading. There's a meeting in Iowa City where every so long, the kind of old timer in that meeting would pull this reading out and make this the topic of the meeting. So I've spent a lot of time in AA meetings reading this reading and talking about this reading and thinking about it quite extensively. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And in order to start off, I wanted to, in a sense, talk a little bit about my family history and how that can be pertinent to how I'm going to frame the discussion today. And, so I have on my mother's side, the kind of first people we have that moved into the country were Cherokee. So we had, that population already here, but the ones that came here came as part of the initial Quakers, which I think is also important in your part of the country. And so they came over here, and the first one that came over was Ezekiel Harlan. He was brought over by William Penn, to kind of start developing the first Quaker community. And we have homes that have our family name on it back in Pennsylvania as part of the Registry of Historic Sites. And, Ezekiel came was a devout Quaker, and his son Ezekiel was a devout Quaker. But the next kid was Ellis Harlan, and Ellis Harlan didn't fall in line. And so let me read something that is part of the official Quaker record. You can go and look at it in the archives for them. And it says this: "For want of taking heed to the grace of God in his own heart, which would have presented him from evil, he gave way to his own evil inclination, so far as to drink strong liquor to excess, and also suffered his passion to rise so high as to strike several persons therein at different times. Therefore, we do hereby disown him to be of our Christian society." So our kind of family history is, tied into the turning away from spirituality. Now, that's my mother's side of the family. My father's side of the family, the first person came here was Thomas Thatcher. And Thomas Thatcher started the Old South Church in Boston, which you can go to AA meetings there now. But that's the kind of a very famous church. The Boston Tea Party, they collected there before they went out and attacked the port of Boston. And Thomas Thatcher was the great Reverend Thomas Thatcher. Peter Thatcher Reverend, Rudolphus Thatcher Reverend were his kids, and it goes down the line. And of course, Ebby Thatcher is one of those Thatchers. And so we have, a relationship at that time. Now, Ebby Thatcher, when he goes and meets with Bill and, says, "Hey, I got sober and I did it through religion," and Bill was interested in those ideas, Ebby Ebby's brother Tom was really kind of excited about what was going on with Ebby. And so Tom started getting involved with Bill and those guys when they were thinking about developing the book. But you can see the idea of the way all the other Thatchers were thinking about it, in the sense that Tom was like, I don't think it's appropriate to call it Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's got kind of a shameful sound to it. So you should call it Victors Anonymous. And he wrote a pretty long treatise about, this is how you should present it, this is how you should sell it, and this is what it should look like. And that kind of shame was significant in our family, because my great grandfather, who was, contemporary of Ebby of the Albany Thatchers, they moved out to California, and and instead of saying, hey, look, we have somebody who's involved in this thing that's starting up and getting people sober, there was just a lot of shame with regards to alcoholism. My great grandfather ended up dying in his 40s of alcoholism. And my grandfather never drank a drop in his life. Now, how both of those family lines end up kind of intersecting for me is, my father died of the disease back in 2009. After struggling years and years and years without being able to get sober. And my mother actually ended up getting sober. And she was the first one of us that actually got sober and stayed sober. And we'll talk a little bit more about the extent to how this impacted my family beyond that. But, my mother was a sad drunk. And so when she would drink, she would, she drank out of a 24-ounce plastic tumbler, and it was, and she'd fill it up with some form of Gallo wine, whether that's the, bad Gallo Chablis or the Hardy Burgundy or whatever. It was always Gallo, and it was always filled to the brim. And she would kind of just disappear. My parents were split up pretty early on, so we lived with my mom. She would kind of just disappear back in her room or whatever. She would listen to sad folk music, and then every now and then she would make me come out of my room and listen, play some sad folk song about a mother and the child. And like, we were supposed to have a moment there, she was kind of slurring her words and, being a stumbling drunk. And my father was but she was a sad drunk. She didn't really do much more than that. My father got to be kind of one of those like boisterous drunks who would then sometimes turn to a mad drunk. And so, for him, it was, making a bunch of noise, trying to get everybody involved in the party. And then every now and then, it would switch, and he'd turn into kind of that aggressive mad drunk. And, to give you a good idea of, one time when I was 15, I had to put him in a headlock because he was choking my stepmother, and that's kind of what that looked like. And, but what happened eventually is my mother got sober, as I said. My mom I wasn't living with her at the time, but she got sober, and she would celebrate her anniversary and have me come give her a cake at an AA meeting. And so I would, I'd go there and, and see what AA was about, really. And the first meeting she had me go to was a super fancy AA meeting. And they had a huge buffet. They had a bunch of different flavors of coffee back in the day when the flavor coffee thing was a big deal. And I mean, you could eat a meal there just fine. Very fancy people who I recognized, not from AA, but out there in the world, were in that meeting. And the speaker was extremely dynamic, connected with the people, which just really, it was a good show. And that didn't make me go, this is where I belong. I identify, this is all great, and so forth. I did understand what the guy was saying, and I did have some kind of identification with it, but I wasn't really ready to say I'm an alcoholic and I need to stop drinking at that point. But what it made is it made AA look like an okay place to be. Right. So I always had this sense like, well, AA is not bad, and that was kind of the attraction part of it. but I wasn't at all ready to come into AA at that time. My drinking started early, and I had that thing, and Bill's story, and and I'm sure many of you know this. When it went to the editor cut off the first 7 paragraphs of his story. So he meant for there to be some history of his life before he started drinking. And in that history of his life, the reason it's important to me is because it kind of illustrates what my life was like. And that's that things just didn't pay off like they were supposed to pay off. When I was early on, somehow they identified me as having strong intellectual capacities. I got put into this program in California called mentally gifted minors. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's literally the name of it. It was mentally gifted minors. And the parameters to be put into that program were the same parameters that they have for people to go into Mensa. So it was very isolated with only, so many people in that program. And they just gave us all kinds of resources. I was given everything I possibly could need to be able to succeed. And they told me I was great. They provided me with tons of positive feedback, all of that stuff that's supposed to be really good for people, and especially young people as they're growing up. I set records in track in all the way back in junior high school. I was, got citywide recognition for playing football when I got to high school. I was able to go play soccer in Europe when I was 15 years old. All of these things were happening that should have been good. But just like Bill's story, when Bill says, I became the captain of the baseball team, I became the president of the senior class. I, learned how to play the fiddle really well, and all of this type of stuff. And in Bill's story, like, then you go, I quit playing baseball and I didn't even graduate my senior year, and that's the same thing. And it's the one point that I really connect with Bill's story, is that sense that it, even before you start drinking, for some of us, things don't pay off like they're supposed to pay off. They don't give me what I need. And, until we take that drink. And when I took that drink, the alcohol paid off instantly. I mean, it did everything it was supposed to do. And it was, it just worked. And pretty much from the very beginning, I just decided that, yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. So, um, you know, even though I had early recognition in sports, by the time I was a sophomore in high school, all of my eligibility was gone because of the fact that I, wasn't going to school. I wasn't doing what I needed to do as a student. I had all the background I needed. I had all the support I needed to be a good student, but it just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it there because drinking became too important to me. When I went to England to play soccer, I got there and I was 15 and I could walk into a pub and order alcohol like I was a 21-year-old in America. And, that I played well during the time that I was there, but created a really bad reputation. And it got to the higher ups in the U.S. soccer groups of the people, because they sent only a small section of us over there. And I basically put a stain on it for US soccer. And I'll tell you that I had a host family that was keeping me there. And one night I went out and one night they got Chinese food, and Chinese food in London back in those days was not good. So I'll just say that right off the bat. But I was a chronic, my stomach never got good the entire time I was drinking. And so I'm over there and we eat this Chinese food with the host family. I go out, I get drunk, I come back, the room starts spinning, and I run into the bathroom but it wasn't really a bathroom. They had built a shower and a closet for me because they said the Yanks like showers. So they literally just built a shower just for me, but there was just a sink and a shower in there. And I got sick in the shower, kind of tried to wash it down, but couldn't wash it down. So I bought a pair of soccer cleats when I was there, and kind of scooped whatever was left that wouldn't go down the drain in the shower into the bag on the outside of the soccer cleats, wrapped it up and stuck it in the box. When I left that family's house, I hadn't gotten rid of that box. So I basically left them a box of vomit for, being such a kind family to host me in America. But that was what my stomach was bad the whole time I drank. I mean, until I stopped drinking. And I would do things like, at the end, the best thing I could do is I got rid of the alcoholic car. I couldn't really drive, I couldn't afford to keep a car. And so I'd have to take the bus to my job. And I had one of those jobs where you could stay drunk all day. It didn't matter. They just needed a warm body there. But on the way to work, I would have to get off the bus, get sick, and then walk down to the next bus stop so I didn't have to stand next to it, and then get back on the next bus coming to make it into work. So I'd always have to leave early because that was just like a common occurrence for me. And so what happened was that as I was crashing down, going into my bottom, my brother was doing the same thing. And he was crashing down and going into his bottom as well. And so one day, I I had a roommate. Well, I had a friend who was leaving the city. We were in Los Angeles at the time. He was leaving the city, and he had a roommate that was getting relocated. And so he had this apartment, and he asked me if I wanted to take it over. And I said, sure. Now, I had no possible way to pay rent for that place. I mean, there was no way. And I had gotten to the point that I understood kind of how you could go through a certain, how long you could go into a place until you had to leave if you hadn't been paying rent. Because I did that in like the 3 places in a row. And so so I said, yeah, sure, I'll take the place over. And I thought, I'd be able to stay there for about 3 months, and then I'd have to find someplace else to live. And so I get there, and the second day I'm there, I get a phone call from my brother saying he's breaking up with his wife, and could he come stay with me? And I was ecstatic because he had a job, and I knew that he could pay the rent. So I said, yeah, sure, come on in. But we together as alcoholics are, we're really we were really bad running partners. We just drank together. We couldn't really go out and do anything. We couldn't, we were just, let's just sit down and drink. And so every night we were drinking a quarter Jack Daniels and a case of beer. And so and we had a liquor store literally across the street, and we told them this is what we want, and we just go pick it up every night. And he moved in sometime in early September of 1987, and by early November of 1987, I walked in the house, and he looked at me and he said, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to start going to AA. And at the time, I said, I'll do it too. I will too. Now, I had spent a month on a couch because I couldn't really, because something was wrong with me. I couldn't get up. I couldn't really do stuff. And finally, my mom, and my brother got me to the doctor, and the doctor, was looking, and they couldn't find anything, but I knew what it was. It was, it was just straight alcohol poisoning. So like I had some stuff that was pretty intense and showing up. I had, as I said, I'd gotten to the point that I had a minimum wage job where I could just stay drunk. That was like back in the day when minimum wage was like $3.35. And so, and again, that's really not going to do much except buy your booze for you. And so so we said we're going to start going to AA, and we tried to go to AA. We'd get dressed up, we'd drive to the AA meeting, we'd kind of look inside and think, not this one, and we'd go back home. And we stayed dry through Thanksgiving. So I said, this is like mid-November. So we stayed dry through Thanksgiving. And on December 3rd, we went to a concert that we'd had tickets for a while. And we're in line at that concert to buy Cokes at the break. And by the time we got to the front of the line, we were ordering beer. And it was, it was one of those things of just, we had no defense against that first drink. And so we ended up getting these, the watered down concert beers, and sat there and drank them. And it was, it was, really the sense of, pitiful demoralization at that point, because we didn't really want to be doing that. And we ended up doing it, and there was no joy in it. There was no happiness, no excitement. It was just misery. And, we were on the way home after, I don't think we even stayed at the end of the concert. We were on our way home, and, kind of looked at each other and said, okay, this has got to be it, that we got to be done. So what happened is we started like hitting some meetings, and one of the meetings we hit was a super, really in your face active AA group. And I was like, it freaked me out. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It freaked me out with everybody coming up to me, because I had the idea that, when people are coming up to you like that, they want something from you. He kind of got taken in by it. So he started going to all meetings of that group. And I kind of tried to stay around that back in the day we could smoke in AA. So, I'd only go to meetings where you could smoke, and I wore all black, and I'd sat in the back of the room, and I'd drink a big cup of coffee with my hand shaking. And, I wanted to look dark and, artsy or edgy or whatever the case might be. But, we stopped drinking on December 3rd of 1987. So our sobriety day is December 4th of 1987. And, December 31st rolls around, and I'm sitting alone in this, little shacky apartment, and, kind of thinking that he's going to come home at some point, and then we'd probably go do something. And, 11 o'clock rolls around, 11:30 rolls around, midnight rolls around, 1 o'clock rolls around, all that type of thing, till about probably 3 in the morning. And, he finally comes in the door, and I've been on a like 8-hour pity party, for myself. Now, there were a couple of old bottles of vodka up in a cupboard that I knew of, old plastic bottles of vodka, probably a, Popov and a Kamchatka, not good stuff. So much so that alcoholics could leave it in the house and not drink it. And so, but I wanted him to think I drank. So I poured them out, but I had them kind of in the sink that looked like maybe somebody drank it and then just like dropped it in the sink. And he walked in the door, and he kind of went in the kitchen. He goes, "Oh, I'm glad you poured those out. I've been meaning to do that." And, and I was, I was like, I was pissed. I was mad because I was on a pity party, and he didn't like come in and like, really validate my pity party, and, and he looked, and I said, well, what were you? And he goes, well, I went to this thing. I meant to probably come get you at some point, but it just, I just kept having, there was something more for me to do. And I just had a great time. And he goes, I had the best time tonight that I've had in a long time. And he goes, and I'm looking at me and seeing what's happening with me, and I'm looking at you and seeing what's happening to you. And, you're not, I'm doing better and you're not. So maybe you should just try doing what I'm doing for a while instead of doing it the way you're doing. And so I got into, I decided to get into that group. And again, that group is all about action, 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 action. They keep you going all the time, get you on, with commitments, and kind of, just 7 days a week, and I was going to more meetings than that even, but, had a commitment at every meeting. I was in the middle of AA, in that sense. And Did that for a while, got in my, first AA relationship, was doing that. I came into AA as a high school dropout. And my first sponsor, basically, as part of my first step, he said, I want you to make a few lists. And the first list was regrets that you have from your drinking. Second list was things you want to accomplish, over, in the short term, and then things you'd like to accomplish over, throughout life. And of course, first regret was, not graduating high school. And then am I, and further on those lists, want to go to college, do that type of stuff. And and so he looked at that first list, he said, okay, that list right there is your insanity. Everything, all those regrets, all that stuff, everything on that list, that's the insanity of your life. And he said, these other two lists, I don't see anything on there that isn't sane, that isn't completely achievable. You can't, that you wouldn't be able to have in life. And if you live a sane life, these are the types of things you can do. And he also said at the time, don't start making another one of these first lists. So as you now are moving forward, don't make another list of regrets. Don't live your life in such a way that you're going to regret. And so I start doing the stuff. Now, again, that group was all about action, and it was action, action, action. And, that was pretty much what I was doing. I did do the work of, the steps as they had this, as they kind of said, okay, well, you need to keep doing the steps. So I kind of did the steps, but it wasn't one of the things like we weren't reading the books together. You didn't read a book with your sponsor at that time. They kind of said, okay, we'll do the steps, and, and you read the book and you kind of do them, as you're going to do them. And, sure, we got on our knees, did the third step prayer, but we didn't really read about the third step. And, I wrote an inventory, but he didn't really like sit down with me and tell me how to do an inventory and walk me through the big book on it. In fact, my first inventory was not an inventory from the big book. If anything, it looked in a sense maybe somewhat like the inventory looks like in the 12 and 12. But really it was really an 8 step. It was really, this is all the crappy stuff I did. I didn't have any reference to resentments at all in that first 4 step. And my sponsor at the time didn't say, hey, you know what, actually this might be a problem. He'd say, I think you did an honest attempt at doing it, and great, and we'll keep moving on. And kind of thought, okay, well, that'll be good. And and I started cleaning up some of that stuff, and I started going, and I started getting better jobs, and I started going to community college and kind of a dual program, so I could get my high school diploma from there, but I'd also start racking up some college credits. So I start doing that and do well and get my high school diploma, and kind of keep doing that. I do well in work, I do well in that, and and I'm like, for the cash and prizes part of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's all looking good. um, but one thing starts happening, and that's that I get to a point where I actually have kind of an executive type job. I've got an expense account. I'm going out and seeing clients, things are good. And I have my own parking space, but my parking space is in a raised parking deck. At the end of the deck was just wires. It's one of the ones that just kind of has wires at the end. It doesn't have a wall. And I'd pull up to those wires, and I'd start getting out of my car, and a voice inside my head started telling me to jump, 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 and I, like, the first few times it happened, I kind of just thought, oh, well, it's just, I'm having a weird little thought or whatever. But then it started happening kind of every day, and it was more and more intense. And I went on with this for about 6 months. And I got to the point where I'd drive up, I'd, get the keys out of the ignition, and I turn and kind of run the other way and hit the lock, because I was pretty sure at some point I was going to listen to that voice. And obviously something was not going well. Something was not right. And I eventually talked with a coworker about, what they were doing. The coworker told me about a counselor that she was seeing. She goes, oh, she's really good and whatever. And I said, yeah, maybe I might want to try to do that. And so she gave me the name, and I went to the counselor and started talking to the counselor. And the first thing the counselor did was say, tell me about your life history. And so I told my counselor about my life history. I was raised by two alcoholic drug addicts, and kind of what what that actually looked like in my house, what the, what that situation was kind of in some, and then other things happened, and so forth. And when I was done telling the story, she was just looking at me. And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Well, you have to understand that normally when people say that kind of stuff, they don't say it like you said it in that kind of matter of fact way that seems disconnected with what you're saying." And I said, "Oh, I'm in AA. I've worked through that stuff. We do inventory and all this stuff, so it's not really." And she goes, "I don't know if you kind of know my background, but I'm very much kind of connected with the recovery community. In fact, I've done a lot of research in the recovery community as well. And I got to be honest with you, when people who have really dealt with that stuff, when they say it, they're not completely disconnected with it. They're not, they've done the work to be able to go beyond that, but they don't say it the way you said it." And I heard her say that, and I knew instantaneously she was right. And I realized, you know what? Something's wrong with my work. And at that point, I went and I got a new sponsor, and it was no longer just about action, running around, being busy in AA. It was, I need to actually get into these steps and do these, and because, I don't want to end up jumping off this building. And started working with the sponsor, and we did read through the book. It was, we're going to go page by page reading through the book. And we did that, and we got to the fourth step, and I realized I need to get to these resentments, and I need to get to this work and do something about it. And I think that I had built a wall up between my experience and where I was in life, because I think I was really afraid of feeling those feelings, of getting to the point of actually experiencing, what actually had gone on. And part of what I had to do literally when I was writing that four step where I actually really got into the resentments was on some people I had to say, could a reasonable person have a reasonable resentment in this situation? And because I was so disconnected. And so I did that work. And yes, as soon as I started kind of getting in there, then things opened up, and I was like, okay, yes, it's like, then all of a sudden I was able to actually let the walls come down and get into that. Now, it wasn't, I had a good sponsor, so it wasn't, okay, let's wallow in your resentment and then go and tell everybody how they wronged you and all of that type of stuff. But it was, we got to address that stuff if you want to move forward. All right. And so we did that. And then I started actually kind of real amends, the real types of amends that, they get to the depth of really seeing what my part is, and really addressing those types of things. And my program, took me to a completely different level. And at that moment, I'd done well in community college, and the community college system in California said, you've taken too many classes now, so we're going to start charging you the California State University cost for any more classes you want to take, because these classes aren't supposed to just be for people to take them in perpetuity. And they said, you do that or transfer to a four-year university. And at the time, it's like, I was looking around. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do that, then maybe I should look for going somewhere and actually really having one of those experiences. So I would transfer to the University of California, Berkeley, and started doing my work there. And up at Berkeley, I met my wife, Julie, who had had the same experience I had, where she was, a high school dropout who went to community college and was able to then transfer to Berkeley. And, we started dating, and we started getting involved in AA and the community. and did all that stuff. And then we went to University of Iowa to go to grad school. So I moved to Iowa City. We moved to Iowa City, and when I got out to Iowa City, I kind of kept my connection to my sponsor there. But when I got out to Iowa City, there weren't a whole lot of people that had a lot more experience than I had in Alcoholics Anonymous. So it was like I didn't get a local sponsor at that time. So I was working kind of that distance. I call every now and then when something's up type sponsorship, but not active day-to-day work in the book with a sponsor in that process. And I did really well in school, and and Julie and I, we got involved with a group called the Midwest Pacific Group when we were in Iowa City, and nobody was going to that meeting in Iowa City. I mean, there was like 7 or 8 people there, and so we started talking to our other friends in the community. And said, "Why doesn't anybody go to that meeting?" And the meeting was participation first, and then a speaker. But participation was called on participation at the lectern. So the chair would say, and John, you come talk now. And the people in the community in Iowa City felt like if they got called on there, they felt like they were being called out. And if they didn't get called on, they felt like they're not obviously not considered good enough to be able to participate in the meeting. So it became this kind of issue of the community. And so, we were talking with people and we said, what if we just changed the sharing part to a lottery system, where it's just random who gets called up. And so, and one of the people there said, well, you can't have it be called the Pacific Group then, because this format came from another meeting and it has to be the same and so forth. So we said, we should be autonomous anyway. So why don't we get rid of the Pacific part? And so we just changed the name to the Midwest Group. But you can go to Iowa City on Sunday night at 6:30 and go to the Midwest Group now. It's a good, thriving group, and and a lot of people from Cedar Rapids have spoken at that meeting, as a matter of fact. But and it was just that sense of learning how to. One of the things that my wife said off the top of her head one time is she was talking, we were talking about moving around a lot, because I've lived in every time zone in sobriety except for Mountain Time Zone in the US. And I've lived in the South, I've lived in the in the North, I've lived in the Bible Belt, I've lived in different places. And one of the things Julie kind of said just off the cuff was, first time you move in AA, you get somewhere and they don't do it right. And you get beat up from that or whatever. And then if you move again, you're like, okay, well, I better figure out how they do it here. And then you're like, I need to adjust to how they do it here. And then the third time you move, you just show up and you go, okay, how do we do it here? And that's what our experience has been, in the sense of just, grow where you're planted, right? In the sense of just be where you are, bloom where you're planted, whatever the case might be. But we were in Iowa City, and and I started doing a dissertation on spirituality in AA and how people negotiate spiritual tensions in AA. So I was, going around and interviewing different people on that, and kind of seeing what their experiences and how they negotiate tensions, and, Native Americans, and, people from, other types of religions, and, Christians and Catholics, and all these individuals, and kind of how do they negotiate these challenges that they're dealing with regards to spirituality in the program. And I started writing the Halloween play. There's a men's group in Iowa City that does a Halloween play every year, and I started writing that play for every 4 years. Did well, was able, got my doctorate there, and was able to go off and and get a faculty job. But again, that whole time I was not actively working with a sponsor on working the steps. I had people I talked to. If I had an issue come up, I'd, find some people that had similar experiences. Again, if something came up, I'd call a sponsor and be like, okay, well, this is what's going on, but not doing the active work. And what happens is, when I'm not doing that, I end up not playing well with others. And I don't know that's going on, but I start repelling people instead of bringing people toward me. And I go off to Michigan for my first job. We go down to Arkansas for the next job. And, so it's like I start my grad school work in 2000. And by 2013 or 14, I'm, I'm causing wreckage. I'm causing wreckage out there in the world. And again, I'm studying AA, I'm writing about AA, I'm a published author about AA, I'm sponsoring people, I'm active in groups, I'm doing all of the action again, but I'm not doing the deep step work with a sponsor. And so I end up actually getting a situation where I can still work for that university, but I can live in Seattle. They let me start an online program. And so I developed that online program, was able to live here, move here, and got a good relationship with a new sponsor, started working with that sponsor, and things were going all right. But I was when COVID hit, we did clandestine meetings out in parks. They wouldn't let us meet in churches. They wouldn't let us go. But we said, we got to be able to meet in person. So some of us started these kind of little park meetings out in the open in parks. And at this one meeting, I heard two separate people say the same thing. They said, Kenny said the loving thing to do would be blank, whatever it was. Two separate people said that from completely different backgrounds. And I thought, I've never had a sponsor say the loving thing to do would be to blank, right? They'd say, well, the big book says this or that, or just whatever. Nobody ever said that kind of terminology. And I thought, I need to kind of get to know this guy a little bit. And start talking to him and said, would you go through the book with me? And he said, yeah. And I had just gone through the book with another sponsor, but really hadn't kind of been rocketed to the fourth dimension there or whatever. And I start going through the book again with Kenny. And the thing I will say about Kenny, which was really refreshing, is that he does not apologize for relying on his higher power. And I think I had some sponsors in a row that were, in a sense, kind of trying to hedge their spiritual relationship. And I was trying to find something that Bill Wilson wrote that shows up in Language of the Heart right after that reading. And I think because it absolutely pins down. So this is what it says. In lots of instances, I think that people find their first great obstacle in the phrase God as we understand him. The doubter is apt to say, on the face of it, nobody can really understand God. I half believe that there is a first cause, a something, or maybe a somebody, but I can't get any further than this. I think people are kidding themselves when they say they can. Even if there were a somebody, why should he bother with little me when in making the cosmos run, he already has plenty to do? As for those folks who claim that God tells them where to drill for oil or when to brush their teeth, well, they just make me tired. It says, our friend is clearly one who believes in some kind of God as he understands him, but he doesn't believe any bigger concept or better feeling about God to be possible. So he looks upon meditation, prayer, and guidance as the means of a self-delusion. And I had absolutely 100% really got to pretty much exactly that place with my spirituality. I mean, I had gotten very well educated. I had gotten very well educated in the sense of understanding how, certain ideas are socially constructed and all of the different stuff that you could come up to get too smart for God. And, and I'd gone to that place, but I'd seen that I had, that it got to the place that people were moving away from me instead of moving toward me. And got to the point where I was completely useless working the steps with people. I'd gotten way too complicated. I had, muddied the water in all these different ways. And it just like it was like trying to take people through, last degree of graduate school when they were coming in as freshmen, right? They had no idea what I was talking about. My work was just a mess. And we started from square one with Kenny, with walking through the book, as kind of page by page, starting with the title page and going through it that way. And he said, I'm going to give you a good, simple, clear cut method to be able to work with people in this program. And so we started doing that work, and at the same time we started looking at some kind of more other spiritual material. And I told him kind of where I was, kind of felt like disconnected with my higher power, and I wanted to be able to create, a better relationship there. And, much in the same way that Bill talks about all those dependencies and all of that stuff in the emotional sobriety reading, it's like all of those different things in life, all those different things I can attain, all those different stuff I can do that doesn't have anything to do with really connecting with my higher power and really being able to create a conscious contact with God. All of that stuff doesn't pay off like it needs to pay off. It's the same thing that happened when I was doing it before I started drinking. It doesn't pay off. What pays off is creating a contact with a higher power, and and moving forward with that connection. And that's what I've done with Kenny. And the thing that's happened in a very short time is that all of a sudden people have been coming back to me, and coming to want to work with me and go through the steps. And like Bill says in here, that if you want to see it really working, if you want to really see somebody connecting in the right way and for that stuff to be happening, it's really one alcoholic working with another, and helping them recover. And through that process, it's then paid off in other areas. And I'll tell you this, the place where it was very telling with me lately is I was on a walk with my brother, and again we got sober together, so we share the same sobriety date, December 4th, 1987. And we were on a walk, and I was talking about, since talk about working with Kenny and stuff. He goes, and he stopped me, and he goes, I just got to tell you that, he goes, I don't know if it's anger or what, he goes, but there was always this thing. And I said, it's irritability, right? He's like, yes, there was always this sense of irritability with you. It was always an undercurrent in everything you did in every waking moment. Like whenever you were around, there was just this like this low level anger. And he goes, and that's just not there now. And that's just not there now. And I wouldn't really, and again, that's something that I was not consciously aware of. I was consciously aware that people were not attracted to me. They didn't want to come towards me. But I didn't really understand that that was there. But over time I know that I can see that that's really the case. And in maybe 3 years ago, probably, I was standing up at a lectern telling my story. And I said, I want to start moving towards that elder statesman mindset. I want to be like one of these old guys who's just like, nice and kind, and people are just attracted to them. And I'm not there yet. I know I'm not in that. I knew I was not in that place, but I had that mindset. And then I was at a meeting, not that long ago, with somebody who was talking about being an elder statesman. And by being an elder statesman, they meant letting the younger people do all the service work. And I was like, I don't think that's it either, but there is something about that sense of what Bill is talking about in the emotional sobriety thing, which is saying, when we get older, we need to be more mature with regards to our relationship with our higher power. We need to really work to cultivate the depths of those relationships. And so now I tell the people I'm going to work with, I'm like, straight up, I'm like, I'm not going to apologize for relying on my higher power. And, and so if you want to work with me, you've got to be open to those ideas. I'm not going to be trying to, I'm not going to be kind of trying to like negotiate that stuff, because when I do that, I end up not playing well with others, and I end up causing damage in my life and in the lives of other people. And I'm just not willing to do that anymore. And so even though you didn't get Kenny, you've gotten a little bit of the result of what it looks like to work with Kenny. And I hope that came through a little bit in what I've said. With that, I'll pass.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for stepping up. At this point of our meeting, we allow the speaker to choose people from the Hollywood squares to talk. And also you could respond back and forth. It's not like you just have to listen if they ask you a question or something.
All right, so I have to ask my friend Jim P to share, because he's the first person who told me about this meeting.
Hey, thank you, Matt. Jim Phelps, alcoholic. Nice to see everybody. And I just I loved your share and the history, and I love this letter. I've been around a while, and it's really been clear to me this week. I was reading New Pair of Glasses, kind of towards the back of the book, with Chuck Chamberlain, and after the prodigal son, when they have the question and answers there, and somebody asks about ego and trying to manage their thoughts, and the first thing Chuck says was, this whole business of, at least back then, it was love yourself so that you can love other people, and kind of a little bit of self-esteem building. And he kind of got on the tangent of, that clearly for him, the last thing he needed to do was think about himself. And he quoted Francis, like Bill did here, to love, comfort, and understand is the, you know, is the path and the bridge to freedom from this bondage of self. And it's really interesting to me to consider, when I got here and I had full acceptance of things and God's will, and through that, I didn't have a lot of time to really consider my trouble and my thinking. And so here it is, today, where, I can think that the solution to my problem is, to focus on me to figure out the solution, when it's still the exact opposite, because that's still my ego. It's still elusive. And when the last thing that Francis says is, when the self dies, you awaken to eternal life. And, for a long time when I was in this program, I thought, okay, well, that's when I physically die. No, he's talking about when the self dies. And, the self needs to be, in the back seat. And so that I can find the present moment. And in that present moment, God has always been there inside me. None of my problems are in this external way of finding them. I came here with every answer that I ever need. I just need to clear out the debris. And how I can do that, though, is again not thinking about me and figuring out all these pathways, but by action of loving somebody else, where I'm, secondary. All of a sudden I'm a channel, and that's it. And if I can, resonate and remember that truth and be this channel and accept everything for how it is and God's will, all of a sudden that serenity shows up, and then I have clarity. And that's what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think relating to the letter that fits me so well today. So thanks for asking me to share, and great to see you up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Can we hear from Julie S. in Iowa?
Thank you, Matt, and thank you so much for sharing. And yes, the Midwest group is alive and well, and that was when we were living in Iowa City, kind of our regular meeting. So it was fun to hear the history about that. I'm not sure I can add anything to what you've had to say, but I certainly getting busy with this business of life that I think is part of sobriety, and forgetting what the foundation is certainly, I certainly understand that. I think I've had a lot of time where what I thought was the business of life is what was taking me further away. And I wouldn't, and that low, when you're talking about kind of that low level irritability, and I used to honestly think that was the fuel that I ran on. And if you took that away from me, then I'd lose my edge. And I thought I was at my most articulate and my sharpest and my most efficient when I was just on that edge of like tearing your face off, essentially. But it was like right under the surface. And and I'm so glad that Grace kept me around long enough to bring me back around. And but I think I will pass with that. But again, thank you so much for sharing tonight. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. How about Jim from Toronto?
Okay, we got it. Okay, thanks, Matt. That was, I'm not going to spend too long. I'm in that spot now. I've been sober quite a while. I'm in that spot that you said where I got to rely more on my higher power. So just to cut it short, that was very inspirational tonight and informative, and that's what I needed. So thank you very much for showing up. Thanks.
Thank you. I can only see half your name, but you're from Pennsylvania. Unfortunately,
We can also go to a show of hands if you.
all right, why don't we do that? Why don't you go for a show of hands?
Okay, Dawn, you're up.
Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm alcoholic. Thank you for sharing. Just based on what I've heard, I hope Kenny's doing okay. So, I had a real tough day today, and I will tell you that it is remarkable how many times it came into my head. Your dependencies are causing trouble here. And of course that comes from, listening to this reading over and over and over and over. And it's really nice to be, I guess in the trenches, if you will, trying to deal with the world and its people. And they were dominating me today. But the thing that I just kept popping into my head was, and when defeat comes, then comes the depression, because I wasn't getting traction on what I was trying to do, which by most people's standards was completely reasonable. And the whole day was just you ever have those days where you should have stayed in the house, or maybe even in the bed, you should have just eat some yogurt in bed. But anyway, I listen, and I am very much in the frame of not apologizing for relying on my creator. But the the experience that I had today is that I can rely on my creator, but that doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to flow. Some days relying on my creator means that it just ain't moving today. And for the longest time, I, like yourself, you know, having had extensive readings in, you know, theoretical ideas and philosophy and all this stuff, had reduced God to a, you know, point of reasonableness, about this much. And now I really have found that there's really, like, the hallmark of my serenity and or my ability not to light into people verbally to get what I want, or bully, or, you know, do these kind of things, is me understanding that maybe the world is unfolding as it should, but it ain't unfolding the way I would have it unfold today. And there's a level of maturity in that is that I can give y'all a pat on the back for. Like, you know, y'all have given me the ability, and I think that's what an elder statesperson, I'm not a statesman, but I think that's what an elder statesperson can do, is they can run into the world, its people, its problems, its systems, you know, all these things, and nothing go the way that you want. Like, I can't even get my internet to work again. Like, it's crazy. I mean, I've just had an incredibly difficult day, one thing right after another. And not get restless, irritable, discontent, you know, oh, poor me, self-pity, all this stuff that comes in. And also through the day, I was moving through quite a few endeavors, and to be able to stand and take the time to talk to, like, a person who's trying to help me, and say, laugh and say, how's it going with you? You know, like, real maturity that Bill talks about, the human nature of understanding that these people are just trying to do their jobs too. And it's okay. And I was just so enamored with the fact that this particular meeting gave me, this is a dependency. You think that if you get this, you'll be okay. And it's not true. It's not true. And the other thing that I ran into today was my sense of entitlement, which is really embarrassing. It's really something that I need to take a real hard look at, the things that I think should be going my way. And I need to take a look at that. Like, but I've had a few opportunities over the course, probably the last month, where the outgoing love of God's creation has been a part of my experience. And I have had it in a measure that was shockingly beautiful to me. Like, wow, like, I can actually feel that. So I know that, albeit, you know, I don't feel as if I've arrived anywhere. As a matter of fact, I feel kind of like herky-jerky awkward right now. Like, things are, I know that I'm in new territory for me. But I'm proud of us, because, like you, I grew up in a house where you didn't open your heart. You know, I learned to shut my heart down, and to have it crack open about another human being's experience that wasn't me doing the things I should do because I'm an AA being of service, but really to have it, just this thing flow out of me. I really have been present with the notion of what this letter is really talking about. When I can understand that I'm having a dependency, and that this dependency is causing my defeat. Oh, okay. Let's don't demand. Let's don't become a demanding person. You can just have a bad feeling here. And like, and have that also have a, from being in this meeting and reading this reading so many times, being aware that, oh, that's the outgoing love of God's creation. It's not me, it's God. And I don't apologize for relying on that. I also don't apologize for having a bad day, because I used to think that if I was, well-versed enough in the spirituality of the program, that I wouldn't have bad days. I believe that. And I now am like, no, it's not when life is coming at me. It's how I'm responding to life, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. How am I responding? And today, in the light of this, I'd like to thank y'all for giving me the ability to have more than one thought. Like if there was other information in my brain. Thank you. And thanks for sharing. And I really do hope Kenny's doing all right.
Share of hands. If not, I know names.
How about our
Sarah,
Hi, everyone. Sarah, alcoholic. Matt, that was, I was truly feeling God's grace with that. And so many thoughts were coming to mind. Once there was something that kept coming back to me. And, when, as you were talking about reaching your own maturity, then the thing that kept coming back to me was intention and how we become more intentional. I have become more intentional with my relationship with God. I have become more intentional with my 12-step work. I have become more intentional with my own program. And it has allowed me to come to that level of maturity that I wouldn't have otherwise come through. It allowed me to reach a higher level of maturity, because I think I'm just more relaxed. Because when I'm not trying so hard. I have an intention, I have a purpose, I have a belief, I have something that I'm going for, and so that's where I've kind of been at lately. And I have found that I'm a much better sponsor that way. I'm a much better sponsee that way. I'm a much better child of God that way. I'm much easier to get along with. And I'm finding that I'm not, we have ceased fighting everything and everyone and everything, including alcohol. I've ceased fighting. I have, my husband passed away. It was a little over a year ago. It was a year ago on February 27th. And during that year, I have been on a journey that it couldn't have happened otherwise. It saddens me greatly that, that was the catalyst for the journey that I'm on, but I'm also very grateful that it has taken me on that journey. It started with an intentional act of having him die in my arms, which was intentional. And then it's taken me on this journey of so many different things happening. And kind of along with that, we have this identification. And by that identification, if we have reached more of a maturity in our sobriety, our emotional sobriety without the dependencies, then we are able to better, transmit the message, transmit the hope. And I believe the message is hope. And it's because I have a level of trust that I've never had before. I have a level of trust in God that I've never had before. And, part of that trust, but lately, I got to tell you that, and talking about having a bad day, though, I had COVID for the last, week or so, or, I'm kind of getting over it, but I have had this COVID. And for some reason during COVID, and I've been doing really good. I miss my husband, obviously, but but being sick, missed him more than ever. And back in, before this happened, back in around the holidays, I had seen a commercial on TV that said about, this woman texting her dead husband and, getting an answer from some woman somewhere. And it was around the holidays. So it was a nice little holiday commercial, one of those almost like a Hallmark commercial, but something else. But then, and so I got this idea to do that. And so I texted his phone, and I did it at the holidays, and I did it again more recently. And I'll share those with you. It says, "Hi, honey, I know you're not at the other end of this phone, but I thought you might be able to read this message from heaven. Just wanted you to know that I'm okay, but I miss you terribly, especially during the holidays. It's like a piece of my soul is gone. It helps to know that God's got you now, though, and that you're probably making him laugh. Love you forever." And the next message was, "Hi, honey, yesterday was a year since you passed. I know this isn't your phone number anymore, but I just wanted to send you a message, and hopefully you can see it from heaven. I miss you so much. Love you still, always, Sarah." To whoever has this number now, sorry if I bothered you. And yesterday I got a phone call from that number. And I wouldn't have had the gumption to do that without this program and without learning that trust and that intention and that emotional sobriety. I wouldn't have been able to do that. And nor would I have been able to answer that phone. It rang, and it was like, it's like that double, oh my God, what's going on here? And I answered it, and this woman said, she told me her name, and she said, "This is my mom's phone, and she wants you to know that you can text it anytime you want to send a message to your husband. And it's fine. You haven't bothered us at all, and we're so sorry for your loss." I mean, that's the world I live in today. That's the world I live in today because of this program, and because of emotional sobriety, and because of people like you who transmit that message of hope and allow me to continue to have that hope, even when I feel hopeless. I still have that essence of hope around me. And that's the essence of this program. It's the hope. That's the message, I believe. So thank you for letting me share. And thank you for sharing tonight, Matt.
Thank you for sharing. That was beautiful.
I don't know. I'm very curious to hear from somebody from halfway around the world. Sally Ann, New Zealand, would you like to share?
Kia ora, everyone. I'm not sure of this meeting's protocol because I'm an Al-Anon Family Group's member. So,
Oh, no, we allow Al-Anons.
oh wow, thank you. That's very kind. I'm very touched, and I've been to a few of these meetings, and thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for comforting me when I'm disturbed and disturbing me when I'm comfortable. Because I came to 12-step recovery through AA because I was the partner of an AA member. And I used to go to those meetings, and they would bring, I'm in Wellington, New Zealand, they would bring, AA would bring out speakers from America, celebrities, and it would be like comedy night. And I would sit in the front row next to my alcoholic, the alcoholic I was seeing, and, we would hear hope, and we would hear strength, and we would hear recovery, and we would hear generally a great message about, work these steps, have a spiritual awakening, and get closer conscious contact with the God of your understanding. And I've been around for many 1 days at a time in Al-Anon family groups. Eventually, you guys, you came up to me gently and you said, "Hey, Al-Anon family groups exist." And I was like, yeah, not for me, thanks. And then eventually, of course, I realized that I hit a rock bottom and I needed help, and I went to Al-Anon family groups, and I'm still here. And what nourishes me today is staying close to that message. And you guys carry that really well for me. You remind me why I'm here, which is for hope, which is why I think, a few of you in a row have had me shedding tears today, because, I too become irritable. And we say irritable and unreasonable without knowing it. With the benefit of closer conscious contact today with the God of my understanding is that some days I know it. And that's about as good as it gets, and that's me on a good day. I know I'm irritable and I know I'm unreasonable, but I can I can look at the time and go, hey, there's a really great meeting on, and I can go and be present to a message that's going to get carried to me around the world from someone who I've never met, but I love with all my heart. And they're going to give me a message that I need to hear today. And the message that Matt carried to me and everyone else who's spoken to me today, the message that I got is that the answer for me is to stay close to God. That irritability that is still active in me, that's on me, you know, and I need to surrender, and I need to look at that, and I need to let go of whatever's behind that. And I really am grateful for the message of hope. That was my cat just saying hello. I'm really grateful for the message of hope around grief and loss, because I too have had a grief anniversary this year. It's been the 1-year anniversary of my sister's passing, and she got a cancer diagnosis and had 3 months to live. And hearing how the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous gives us courage and hope and help in all our affairs. I was talking to someone in recovery the other night, and I said, you know, I came in the rooms because I was broken, because I loved an alcoholic and my life was unmanageable and I wanted to die. I wanted the pain to stop, and that was my best thought. And then the other thought was, hey, maybe try those Al-Anon family groups meetings. And I did. And now, mumble years later, I have different troubles, you know, they present differently in my life, but the answer is still the same. The answer is in the steps, and it's hidden very, very cleverly in step 12 in all our affairs. It doesn't matter what's going on in my life. It doesn't matter what the current chapter is called in regards to what my troubles are and my difficulties. The 12 steps have got me, and I need to stay close to people who are living them and working them. And those people are you. So thank you so much to everyone who does service at this meeting. Thank you, Matt, for carrying a beautiful message to me in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Wellington. And thank you, Joel, for allowing me the grace to share and be here with you all. I really, really appreciate everything that you've given me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally Ann. I just have one quick question. What time is it there?
It is tomorrow. I reside in the future. So any of you who are worried about tomorrow, I want you to know that it's great.
Tomorrow,
God,
what time?
and it's great. So it's tomorrow at 2:57 p.m. So it's Friday.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Any last thoughts, Matt, before we close and go into prayer?
The only thing I want to say is that, so, you know, as I said, this is a family affair for me. So my mother got sober. She's still sober. My brother and I got sober together. We're both still sober. And I have a now 20-year-old son who got sober at 15, and he's still doing the deal. So, you know, this disease can destroy families. It can also, then this program can heal families and transform them.
Okay, at this juncture, we traditionally close by going into our inner room, pray, meditate, reflect on what was said for about 1.5 minutes.